Joining me now in the studio is Mustafa Barghouti, the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative Party. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. As we've just mentioned, there's a ruling from the United Nations Security Council saying there must be an immediate ceasefire for Ramadan. The International Court of Justice says there must be more humanitarian aid. But our correspondent Hani was telling us earlier on about the litany of attacks and strikes and the devastation that's been happening in Gaza just in the last several hours. Was there ever a point at which Palestinians, do you think, had any faith that the UN Security Council and the rulings by the ICJ would actually make a difference?
Unfortunately, we have great doubts not only about the ability of the United Nations, but about the international community in general, and especially Western community. Because Israel is allowed to act with complete impunity. It is behaving as if it is above the law, above international law, above international humanitarian law. It is committing genocide in front of the whole world. We're talking about 39,000 people killed, not 32, 39,000 if we count the 7,000 under the Abel, including almost 15,000 children. And
no, forgive me for interrupting. These are numbers that are coming from the Gaza Authority.
Yes, but they are correct. We have the names of these children, the names of these people. Nobody negates them, even the United States of America, which did in the beginning. But this is the reality. Genocide, collective punishment, terrible acts against the population, and also terrible siege and terrible ethnic cleansing. We're talking about no less than 700,000 people are starving now in the north of Gaza, including 350,000 children, and many of them have started to die. But in addition, the viciousness of the Israeli attacks. I have our medical teams in the north of Gaza, and they reported to us horrible things. How the Israeli army in the near Shifa hospital and in Shifa hospital has executed people, have burned families like Abu Dayya family. They burned them to death by burning their house while they were inside them, by killing so many other families, 22, 23, 25, by bombarding the whole neighborhood around Shifa Hospital, and it goes on. There are reports that 200 people were executed from the people who were hiding or trying to take shelter from the civilians who were taking shelter in the Shifa Hospital. And it goes on. The big question here is for how long Israel would be allowed to be impunitive. And the other big question, why the international community, and especially the Western countries, imposed on Russia 11,000 sanctions in the first 2 months of the war with Ukraine, and no single sanction has been imposed on Israel. I do not think Netanyahu will stop, and his fascist government will not stop unless there are sanctions and threats of boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
The closest that the US has got so far to expressing its concern with the situation in Gaza is to abstain from the UN vote, which allowed that UN resolution to go through, given what you said.
And then they tried to water it down by claiming that it was not obligatory.
Which was a strange phrase, which has got a lot of the diplomatic community in some consternation. People are still trying to work out what that meant, because, of course, UN Security Council resolutions are legally binding.
Of course they are binding, of course.
In that
By the way, the language of that resolution is 10 times stronger than the language of the resolution 242 and 338, which are used as the Bible for peace processes.
Given what you've said, and given that it seems to be down to the US to be able, if at all, to be able to have some leverage against Israel, how concerned are you as we now look towards the situation in Rafah, the Israeli threats to move into Rafah? Do you regard that, given the fact that Netanyahu has now said that he will send a delegation back to talks for a ceasefire, how much of that do you think is leverage as far as those talks are concerned, and how much of that is a genuine threat of the remaining people in Rafah?
It's a very dangerous situation, because the United States is not saying that Israel must not attack Rafah. They are saying they have to attack it in a certain way to reduce the number of people killed. But you're talking about 1.4 million people stuck in an area that is no more than 40 square kilometers. Of course, if you threw stones on people, they will die. What about, and they are sending Israel more bombs and more jet fighters, F-35 jet fighters, and they're sending contradictory messages. From one side, they say they care about the civilian population. From the other side, they are encouraging Israel to attack by giving them the weapons and by not saying that Israel should not attack Rafah. Why should Israel attack Rafah? What do they want to achieve? To have a huge massacre, the greatest maybe in the whole human history in modern times? Or to try to actually achieve what Netanyahu has been trying to achieve, which is to try to evict people from Gaza, creating the worst kind of ethnic cleansing? That is, these are the realities. And the world community must stop an attack on Rafah, because it would mean a horrible, horrible massacre.
I want to ask you about the potential involvement of Palestinians in the governing of Gaza when the war eventually ends. Given the structure of the Palestinian Authority, as you see it at the moment, given the lack of trust that exists on so many different sides, what role or what shape do you think a Palestinian Authority should take in order to have a role in running Gaza?
Look, the West and the United States in particular talks about democracy everywhere except in Palestine. They speak about democratic elections in Serbia, maybe in China, but not in Palestine. We have to rule ourselves as people. We don't need anybody to rule us from outside, and definitely we don't want an reactivation of the Israeli occupation of Gaza. But Mr. Abbas went on and formed a government by his own, on his own, without consulting with other political forces. In our opinion, the best solution is a national consensus temporary government that would be acceptable to everybody. And that would, of course, unify Gaza and West Bank and prevent a continuation of Israeli occupation. But it should be temporary because it has to organize free democratic elections, something we didn't have since 2006. And it is our right as people to elect our leaders democratically.
Mustafa Barghouti, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.